Welcome to another episode of the PGTK podcast, an interview podcast. My name is Emmanuel, and our guest this week is another independent wrestler based here in Texas, and that is Caine Carter. We talk about his 2023 recap and what his matches and highlights were for that year, as well as training under two wrestling schools that included the Rhodes Wrestling Academy that really shaped his wrestling experience. We talk about his goals are in 2024, and this is probably the most really deep advice to his younger self as this conversation goes on. And you can follow this podcast, leave a 5-star review, but most importantly, let's share this episode to two people so that they can enjoy this episode along with us. And now, without further ado, here is our conversation with Caine Carter. Hey, Caine. Oh, wow. We're off to a flying start. How are you?
Oh, man. I was better. Oh, I'm good.
Good. 2023 has been a big year for you. Like, what were some highlights that you've had during the course of that year? And, like, what were some matches or moments that you think that are very special to you?
Well, anytime I get to perform is very special. It's been my dream since I was 2. But to highlight some, I won the WAW Workhorse Champion and WAW Waco Association of Wrestling. It's literally the closest I have to a home promotion. And I won their Workhorse title there in the Fatal 4-Way. And one of my opponents was my tag team partner, Devion. And after the match, we had a big brotherly hug. And that was really special to me because I got to do it in front of my grandma and aunts and your friends, my mom. That was really special. Another one I would say is winning the HOT Syntex Championship against Michael Schaefer. That was in Austin, and I have a long history of living and performing and training in Austin. So that was just very special to me because I'm always eager and kind of on edge going into certain matches where I don't know if I'm going to be as well received. And I knew I was going to be pretty well received, but winning and having as much support as I did, that was very special to me also. 2023, it's been up and down. So I would say my 2 title wins are the special moments to highlight.
And like, what was that feeling of getting that championship? Like, what was when the ref counted 3 and you hear "and new"? What was that feeling like?
It's special. I'm very much in the zone whenever I'm out there performing, and I'm very in tune with the crowd and what's going on in ring. So I usually tune out the announcements or the ring announcer whenever I win and I make my entrance. Sometimes I'm off with my entrance because I don't realize the promoter's saying my name at this time, and I'm like, oh, well, this time I could be, posing and appealing to the crowd, but I'm so zoned in that sometimes I don't get to register what they're saying. So I was just taking it all in for what it was. It was very special.
Yeah, and it's interesting too. Like, if having that moment of like hearing "and new," it's like that must have been like a feeling of elation after all the hard work that you've done.
Absolutely. Each time this happened, I've been a champion with multiple different promotions, but it's a feeling that never gets old.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, like all that hard work kind of came from when you were training on the Rhodes Wrestling Academy. And how did you approach the Wrestling Academy, and what was it like being under Dustin Rhodes, who's done 5 decades of wrestling work, and now he's imparting all of that work to you?
So I'll get to that question, but with the person I am, I always have to acknowledge the real stuff that goes on. And I attribute a lot of what I know and my training and my grind to my time in Colorado at Rocky Mountain Pro. That's really where I was shining my wheels, or whatever that expression is whenever I was polishing everything up and really crisping out who I was or who I wasn't, trial and error, this and that. So that's really where a lot of the grind and the payoff comes from is attributed to that time. Dustin's was a special time. And it was very much a grind also. But being under a person with 5 decades, and being as well received as I was to him, and having for the 3 months that we had a connection, I'm very blessed to say that I go to the Rhodes Academy and train under Dustin. Through that, I got my AEW Dark match. I filmed a vignette. Cody, I was on AEW Dynamite for a brief clip. We recorded a vignette, and through all that, it created times that had it ended 2 years ago before I hit the independent scene and really started grinding, had it ended then, I could say that, I gave it my all. I lived it out, and for what I put into it, I got out.
And what was the advice, whether it's in Rocky Mountain or at the Rhodes Wrestling Academy? What advice did the coaches from either wrestling academies give you as you started to learn the ropes of being in the ring?
They both said to never stop training. The Rocky Mountain Pro Academy is a continuous training facility that you sign a year-long contract, and you can continue out your career and your independent growth there. Dustin's is only a 3-month program, and with his so with his notoriety, he can pump out 3-month class after 3-month class after 3-month class, and send students off to the wind. And so that's kind of what he did. But both of what they installed in me is to never stop training, never stop grinding. This business is constantly progressing, so you have to progress with it.
And especially now, when you graduated both academies, what was your first experience coming out of it? What were some obstacles? What were some hurdles that you had to go through? Being that you're out of these wrestling academies and facing real life being in the wrestling business.
So with Rocky Mountain Pro, it was around the time of COVID. I was in a really different state with a completely different economy, and a bunch of things piled on top of me to where I didn't graduate Rocky Mountain Pro. I didn't do the year-long training. I ended up moving back to Texas. My aunt got COVID and almost died, and so it was just a hard time for me personally and my family, but it was always my goal to get back. So that was an obstacle I faced, is, having to kind of go back to reality and take a step back. With Dustin's, like I said, that I got flown out to Orlando for AEW Dark. I had seen greatness. I saw CM Punk in the lobby of the hotel that I was staying at, that they put me in. I had conversations with guys like Matt Hardy and Scorpio Sky, and I saw what was to be had. So leaving the Rhodes Academy was very different, because I knew I was coming back home, and I'm from a very small town, so it was very scary. I didn't feel like leaving was something I was ready for, but I knew it was coming, so it was very scary to deal with. But once I got my feet moving and my gears shifting in the independent scene, I realized why they do tell you to never stop training, because I could have let it take over and came home and just, been in a shell or curled up in a ball and not really pursued, but that's not who I am. I saw the tip top of the mountain, and that's still, even 2 years after hitting the independent scene, that's where I'm still thriving to go.
And being in AEW for that brief time, did you have access to meeting, you mentioned CM Punk and the Hardys, did you have access to these veterans, and did they impart any wisdom from you while you're at AEW at that time?
So not the veterans. How it went was we flew out. Dustin was kind of overseeing us because we're his students. There was only 2 of us that got the opportunity. And so he's kind of overseeing us. And there's even some, side-eyed looks like, who's this person or whatever. But for the people I did talk to, just to name a few, I got to speak with Max Caster for a brief second. I got to speak with Sammy Guevara in the lobby of the hotel after the match, and he had some good words of wisdom. The other guys like Matt Hardy and seeing CM Punk, that was in passing. But the other guys, it was all in passing. I never got a moment to sit down and talk to any vet. I knew the lady that runs AEW social media page, and she invited me down to the hotel lobby after an episode of Dynamite, because we were there from Wednesday to Saturday. She invited me down there, knowing everybody would be down in the lobby and whatnot. So I didn't want to impose on these people's private time away from work. So it was just a chill setting with everybody else, aside from, like I said, Max Caster and Sammy Guevara.
You were a fanboy for a good few minutes with them either way, right?
Yes.
Oh,
So
okay.
I was from here to my wall to Kenny Omega, and that's my favorite wrestler. And I had never been, what's that? What did you just say? In shock or whatever?
Yeah.
Like
fanboy. That's, yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't like that with anybody else except for Kenny Omega. I saw him and I was like, oh my gosh.
Stop it. It's like, hold it. Of course, you have to compose. You have to compose for sure. Yeah, and also, like, at that time, too, like, with AEW, like, what were some lessons that you've learned as you started going to this? What were some lessons that you've learned, whether it's hard learned or something that you picked up along the way? What were some lessons that you've had in the past?
Always be ready. Always ready, because you never know what opportunity could pop up or who could be watching. Granted, I knew that I was there for an AEW dark match, but it doesn't hit you until you know that you're 3 matches away, you're 2 matches away, your next match, you know what I mean? And once it starts to hit you like that, the thoughts do come in, is like, am I made for this? Am I ready to do this? Can I do this? And the big lesson I learned just from my experiences, you always have to be ready. So you never have to get ready. And so whatever moment that you're ready for doesn't pass.
And then speaking of that too, because like I was at the match over in Howard, Texas, with the Sensex Championship with Cavins and Danny Ryan. What was that match like? And what was the preparation feat coming into that match?
Like I said, I'm always ready for anything and everything. And those 2 guys are my friends. And I'm always loving to perform. I do this for myself, but also the people. And so I had very much confidence going into that match that we would give the people what they wanted. And no matter the winner, although I was very confident in myself, it would be a great match. It would be talked about. It would be one that people enjoyed. And that is really what I do this for. You know, I beat myself up heavily if I feel like I don't give the crowd something to engage in or be appealed by, because I can go out there and do as many cool moves as I want, crisp and perfect to perfection. But if the crowd says that, oh, that match didn't mean nothing no more than the next one, then I feel like I haven't done my job. And I feel like with Danny O'Ryan and Cavins, we went out there and we did our job, and everyone was satisfied in the end.
What was it like working on each other's strengths during the match? Like, what can you draw from their strengths to make this match great?
Their performance aspect. I feel like we are 3 young stars, you know, and it takes some time to mold out our full potential, you know, and build to that, and build a fandom that will give us back what we've put in. So with guys like that, I just know that they're stars, and working off their strengths and even weaknesses, it comes with ease. You know, you can get back there and you can go out there, or you can get back into the back with the boys and prepare to put on a show. And some people are just hard to work with. Some people aren't of the same caliber and experience. They may be of caliber and experience, but they lack the connection with the crowd aspect. I know with those 2 guys, they're clean, crisp, and very good in the ring, but also their presence has a star factor to it. And I feel like that goes with all 3 of us. It was very easy to work with those 2 guys.
It's that's interesting too, because like I was watching the entire match. Every single one of you guys has something unique on the table that everyone has their equal weight with each other, especially when Cavins did the frog slash. That one surprised me the most, and when he did the 619 before that. So like those little nuances really can make a match make or break, because like every spot will have its contribution, because you don't want something that's like that will throw the entire match off. But like at the same time, seeing you three guys perform, and of course you won this one, so you retained. So that's probably the best news that you'll get out of that match. So, but it's kind of nice seeing that aspect where everyone has their weight, and you can tell the crowd was, and like that was the big indicator for every match nowadays is if the crowd is in it, you know that the match is going to be great too. So, will you be seeing them down the line? Will there be a rematch?
Absolutely, whether it be individually or back in another triple threat and maybe add another person to make it a fatal four-way. I would love to. You can definitely see us in the ring sometime in the future.
Yeah, it's nice seeing like with Danny with Caine. So like they have so much in store in the business. You can tell like everyone has something special that they deliver on the table too. So this match, of course, was in 2024, and 2024, the year is already underway. And of course, like as a wrestler, as someone who's in the business, what are you looking forward to this year?
The change. There's always something changing. Who would have thought? Who on earth would have thought that on the road to WrestleMania, we would have Cody Rhodes, Roman Reigns, CM Punk, all at some press conference doing what they did, I mean, who would have predicted that? So I just love how diverse and intricate and convoluted all at once this business could be. And that's really what I'm looking forward to in 2024.
Do you have any goals for that year that you have in mind? What are some milestones that you would like to reach this year?
I want to add on to my list of states performed in, for sure. Because the goal is to go worldwide, and you don't go worldwide without being nationwide. You don't become nationwide without, taking grasp upon multiple states. So adding state list is main goal for sure. Another one is just to be recognized by certain promotions and maybe getting my foot in the door with those. Whether it be when GCW comes to Texas or whether it be me traveling to Kentucky for OVW. Those are some goals I see reasonable for 2024.
If you have, and I'm bringing this up with a lot of the guests on here, if you have a dream match, regardless of outcome, promotions very open. I brought up Japan on prior episodes because some of them are going to have these aspirations in Japan. If you have a dream match, and regardless of outcome, what would that be?
Mine personally is Kenny Omega. And I say that realistically, at the age difference that we have, it is possible. Now, an all-time dream match would be with Jeff Hardy. And I feel like that's just not reasonable with the age difference and how close to the end of his career that he is. So definitely Kenny Omega. In Japan, absolutely.
Ooh, okay, all right. Tokyo Dome, Korakuen Hall,
both. It wouldn't matter at that point,
Okay, interesting. And like if it's like a Forbidden Door version 3, and it's in one of those, like that would be a possibility too. So that's a good matchup actually.
It could be a Kenny Omega Road to Retirement tour match. He could, be performing in Japan, Canada, America, all these places that he has before on the road to retirement, and I would be fine with that.
Just facing him in the ring, that's probably your main objective on your side of the ball.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, it was step back too, because we were talking about like the hustle and the grind portion of business, like especially you've been on the road constantly, every month, every week. How did you find balance in going through these venues and going through these events? Like, what was your method of just finding peace as you're going into, like, let's say you're going to like Houston, or this month, or you're going to San Antonio? How would you find that peace going to these events every single month?
That's embedded in me. I am a wandering soul. I don't like being in one place for too long. It was just a match made in heaven for me to be a fan of professional wrestling, because in this profession, you do travel all the time. And before I got involved in the world of professional wrestling, I had moved and traveled and wandered and lived in certain parts of Texas and out of state on multiple occasions. It brought peace among itself, because I'm not peaceful if I'm in one place for too long.
So you're kind of like I would say, nomadic would be a term that could be that, where you're constantly on the move. Would that make sense?
I would say a gypsy soul.
Okay.
Just take me where the wind.
Okay, gotcha. That actually makes sense even more too. So, and especially, do you have cities that you're, whether in Texas or anything, what was the most enjoyable town that you've been in wrestling?
Definitely Houston and Austin. Didn't sure whenever I was training there, but I never got to actually perform in Denver. Colorado is it's like a second or third home for me. We had spent multiple ski resort vacations, and growing up, I would go there for birthdays. So that was definitely special. But I never got the chance to perform in Denver or anywhere in Colorado. So Austin and Houston, I would say, are the main special ones to me because I have history in both of those cities before wrestling. And now being able to connect with people in the audience and build a fandom and become familiar with the cities, that means a lot to me.
Interesting too. So, and do you have you talked about willing to work out of state and working past the Texan border. Like, do you have any dream cities that you would like to wrestle in?
New York, for sure. California, most definitely. Tokyo, absolutely would love to go wrestle in Tokyo, Japan. Just where wrestling is prominent and is a part of the culture. I'm very lucky to be a part of Texas. Texas wrestling has been around forever, and it's a part of the culture if you're from here. So I'm very blessed. And outside of Texas, it's definitely anywhere in Florida, California, like LA, or Tokyo.
Yeah. And you mentioned like Texas being a big wrestling scene. From when you started being in the business, how has the Texas wrestling landscape changed?
Not much, if I'm being quite honest. May not seem like much to me because I'm involved in it and I'm in the inner workings of it. So nothing drastic is ever happening. It's always happening on smaller scales. But the one thing that has changed is one of the prominent Texas figures just got signed to AEW, Brian Keith. So other than that, it's just been a slow, steady rolling ball. And like I said, everything happens on moment's notice, and it's not very drastic to where I don't see much of a change since I've joined.
Yeah, that's interesting too, because like I guess from a fan standpoint, the change has been very quick, but at least from your side, because you've been in the industry before, like you kind of see where the progress is. But as a fan myself, like I get to see Inspire, I get to see Reality of Wrestling, I get to see Mission Pro, like all these promotions show up and seeing how they deliver in terms of the wrestling. But at least, yeah, that was a refreshing answer, Caine. Whether that was a really refreshing answer about how like the wrestling scene has its progress, but it's at a slower pace. And yeah, and seeing Brian Keith with him being all elite, I saw him at Inspire and Reality months ago, and then now suddenly he shows up out of nowhere.
So I will say that from here, they say that we are definitely in a rebuilding era of Texas wrestling post-COVID. You know what I mean? So I wasn't in the Texas independent scene before COVID. So I didn't really get to experience it. But from here, we're definitely in a rebuilding era of bringing Texas indie wrestling back to what it was and potentially bigger.
Yeah, exactly. And it's always the pandemic kind of hampered everything, really hampered their progress down because it is a medical situation. So like we couldn't do much. But now when Texas started loosening up, a few years later, now we're seeing this like basically this renaissance of how Texas wrestling is. And of course, a lot of these promotions past Texas are showing up too, because now we're seeing the restrictions being loosened. So like, now we're seeing a lot of these events probably show up now out of nowhere, and we're seeing newer promotions show up. So it's kind of nice to see. It's nice to see how like Texas wrestling is. It's thriving. It's thriving very quickly. So, but we'll get to that high level. But at least like a lot of these promotions are now being accessible now. With a lot of the stuff that's happening when restrictions are starting. But otherwise, yeah, we're close to wrapping up. But yeah, thank you so much, Caine. Thank you for being the honest. Thank you for being so honest on your answer. So it's kind of nice seeing a refreshing perspective on the wrestling industry too. So
Absolutely. That's all I know how to be, is honest, and I'm an open book. So I love doing these, and I love the platforms to be able to speak and tell my story and maybe inspire somebody. So thank you just as much.
yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to end this conversation here too. So I always end my interviews with this. So the World Health Organization listed adolescents between the ages of 7 and 19. Between those age ranges, people grow. Those adolescents will start learning things as they grow up within those ranges. Now, if you could be in the same room as Caine Carter at age 16, what would you give him as advice?
We didn't talk about life on here. So 16-year-old Caine Carter was probably in jail. I would tell him that where he's at and what he's doing is not really him. I definitely went through an era of where I wasn't who, I mean, I guess it was me. I did it. I did everything I did. I was who I was for the years that I was the person that I was, but I would just tell that person to stay strong mentally, because no matter what I went through, I was always very mentally tough and persistent and progressing and moving on with life. And I would just tell him to keep that same mentality, because he was not applying it. So whenever you start to apply that mentality that I know you have, it'll take you further than where you ever were. And here I am, a living testimony of that.
Thank you so much, Caine, for having you on. And where can we find you on socials? And what's next for you?
Oh, you can find me at Caine Carter _ on Instagram, Caine Carter _ on Twitter, just Caine Carter on Facebook and TikTok. What's next for me is just progression, very much progression. And I promise not to stop grinding and hustling and giving my best to the fans. All the fans that support me, thank you. All the new fans that I may be speaking to now, I really appreciate you, and I hope you come along for the ride, because I'm doing this just as much for you as I am me.
And that was our conversation with Caine Carter. His story has been very inspiring because a lot of hard times were thrown at him. Adversity came his way, but yet he rose to the occasion to becoming the best wrestler that he could be. And he got to see a bit of a preview while he was there at AEW. So expect a future episode with him down the line. Still working on details with the schedule that I have, as well as what he has. So just follow this podcast if you want to see more of Caine on this show. And on next week's episode, much like our prior guest, Brad Gilmore, this guest has been a commentator, but this time he is commentating on the Austin, Texas wrestling scene. And you can follow this podcast on our socials on Instagram, X, Threads at PGTK Pod. Search us on Spotify, search PGTK Podcast, as well as sending us an email at pgtkpod@gmail.com if you have any questions, comments, or if you want to be a guest on this show. Leave a 5-star review, but most importantly, share this podcast or even this episode so that they can enjoy this episode along with us. And as always, thank you so much for listening. Be awesome with each other, and I will see you guys on the next episode of the PGTK Podcast, an interview podcast.